I've been sent in a really great collection of cat photos from a long-time channel supporter, Felix the Cat, and we're a long time overdue an episode of Anthony Edits Your Photos. So this is the photograph that we're going to be editing today. It is a ridiculously cute moment that has been captured, but in terms of photography, I think Luminar Neo is going to be able to help us improve this considerably. So let's get into Luminar and see what we can do. I'll be honest, Lando, I really don't think this setup is going to work out too well. Can you hop down, please? So the first thing we want to do in our catalogue view is load in the photos. So we come over to the folders here, click the plus icon, navigate to the folder we want and select that folder. And now we have our folder loaded here with 9 awesome cat photos. Now if I select the photo that I want to work on, you can see in the bottom left hand corner here where this eye is. If you don't see the information panel, just click that and then you'll be able to see information about the photo. And it's always a good idea to understand the file that you're working with. Now I did request from Felix the Cat, who from now on I shall just call Felix, to send through a RAW file, and the Canon EOS 5D Mark IV shoots RAW, but unfortunately I haven't got access to that. All I have is a TIFF. But having the TIFF rather than the RAW file is actually going to be a good learning tool for us, because I'm going to be able to explain to you guys why it is so important that we work on a RAW file wherever possible. One of the big issues with the TIFF file straight away is the size of it. It's 172 megabytes, which is significantly larger than what the original RAW file would have been, and the RAW file would actually contain much more usable data than what we have available to us here in the TIFF. And one other thing to note is that the file name appendage does say edit, so I'm actually wondering whether Felix has already done a little edit to this and then resaved it out. But in any case, we're going to work on this file and just see what we can do to improve this already really lovely photo. So before you begin any photo edit, I recommend you have a game plan. Analyze the image in front of you and look for areas that are of concern, visually distracting. Look for areas that you want to enhance or bring the viewer's attention to. So in this photo, without doubt, the most important thing here is this super cute kitten just perching its head over the top here. I really want to draw the viewer's attention to this. And so this area here is our key area of focus. The secondary importance is the cat that this guy is leaning onto, and then beyond that we have all these elements in the background. And because this was shot with quite a shallow depth of field and quite close to the subject, that's meant that the background has gone nicely out of focus. However, I still find the TV over here, this line that's coming down straight towards the kitten's head, and the fireplace over in the background here, I just find those elements distracting, and also whatever this is on the carpet here as well. If we move away from purely the aesthetics of the photo, there is another argument here, and that's in favour of these elements in the background. To Felix, these elements around the outside may be actually very important because they speak to the time when this photograph was taken. You know, he may renovate in a couple of years, do away with all this stuff, and so these elements may actually end up holding nostalgic value, and so he wants them incorporated in the photo. But it's not my living room, I'm doing the edit. I think this guy's the most important, and so I'm going to minimize the elements within the background. So let's jump over to the edit and actually see what we can do here. I'm going to scroll up, and as you guys know, I would normally be diving into develop raw here, and that's going to allow us to actually set the exposure correctly, work with our highlights and shadows. But watch this, if I bring the exposure down here, we should be bringing back detail outside. If we were working with a raw file, we would be. But because we're working with a TIFF here, JPEG would be the same. Once you've got those highlights blown out, once those pixels hit pure white and they're saved as a TIFF or a JPEG, doesn't matter how much we bring our exposure down, doesn't matter how much we try and recover the highlights, we're not getting any detail there. It's darkening it down, but it's just becoming a muddy grey mess. So, sorry to drive this point home, but it's so important. Shoot in RAW whenever possible and edit your RAW files. If you've got a whole load of photos that you want to edit and they don't exist in RAW, don't panic about it. I'm just suggesting going forward shoot in RAW, but hopefully you'll see through this edit that we can still absolutely improve our JPEG and our TIFF files. The exposure on the cats here is pretty good, so I'm going to leave that alone, but I'm going to grab Smart Contrast and just give that a good crank, see what that's doing for us. And while you might assume that introducing smart contrast always to the right, pushing in more contrast would be a good thing, sometimes counterintuitively, if you take it towards the left, you can actually start to bring back a little bit of detail into the highlights. Obviously that's too much and flattening out the photo, but I may want to just drop this just ever so slightly. I'm just being mindful of the little highlight details on the kitten's nose here. I'm going to grab the highlights and have a little move of that as well. Now I'm quite liking actually boosting the highlights up just a little bit. Usually I'll be taking my highlights down into negative territory, but again, because we're not working with raw, rather than recovering highlight detail, we're actually just muddying up the whites. And so on this occasion, I'm not actually going to go into negative territory. For once, I'm going to push things up on my highlights. The shadows, I'm just going to grab those and have a little play and see what I'm liking here. And we'll set that down into the negative territory. I'm just looking at this little area here on the cat's fur, those kind of browns that exist in this area. As I drop those shadows down, we kind of lose those and it's almost correcting that area. So I prefer that. And we can use the eye tool here to see our before and our after. It's subtle what we've done so far, but I'm just wanting to make sure that our base pixels that we're going to be working on of the cats here are in a pretty good place. So like I say, really subtle from here to here. Okay, as I move on to the whites and blacks here, I'm mindful of the fact that we're already blown out to pure white here. So if we grab this white slider and just push everything nuclear, you know, we're not going to destroy those pixels anymore. That it's over for those pixels, it's done for them. And so I'm not too concerned what's going on in this very brightest part of the image. What I am concerned about though is how the cats are looking. And so I think these kittens are actually benefiting from a little bit of a boost in the whites. If we take the blacks all the way to the left, you can see that we're introducing a really nice rich contrast, but at the same time we're losing the detail in the fur, and I don't want to do that. So when you think, oh yeah, I really like the contrast of this, just don't get carried away. We can add more contrast later, but at the moment when we're doing this initial develop, we need to be mindful of the fact that we've got a nice dynamic range through the photo. Now as we move on to the white balance, let's take a look at the fringe areas between what should be grey and where the white is. And you can see a lot of yellow pixels going on here. And around this area, we've almost got some sort of orangey magenta tones going on. So I'm getting the sense that within this environment, we had a bit of mixed lighting going on. We've got daylight outside, potentially we've got a lamp on or the light on inside. And that's just given us a little bit of a funky colour balance, which I feel is a little bit too warm. We've got a little bit too much yellow going on. So I'm just going to bring the temperature just down slightly and grab the tint as well and just give that a little wiggle and just see where I feel like that should be sitting as well. Obviously, we've also got the custom white balance picker here where we can come over and we can sample something within the image that we think should be pure grey. So this backboard of the, I'm guessing, fireplace here, if we click that, we're forcing Luminar Neo to recognise that as a neutral grey and then shift all the other colours accordingly. However, I'm not convinced because of the colour casts that we're going to be able to get an accurate colour balance by clicking on that. One thing that will probably help this file is sharpness. So I always zoom in when I'm dealing with sharpness so that I can get a sense of what's going on at a pixel level. So I'm going to grab the sharpness slider, crank that all the way to 100 and have a look how that's going. That was too much, but somewhere around half might be good. Okay, I'm absolutely going to take a look at Enhance AI, but the first thing I want to do is jump into the Erase tool and just see what we can do to get rid of this little black mark we've got just here. So I'm just going to paint over that and hit Erase, and there we go. Luminar Neo's got rid of that for us. I think it's introduced a rogue whisker here, you know, and sometimes that happens, that the AI is replacing the area you paint over and it's taking other parts of the photo and it doesn't always get it right. And if that's the case, like here, I can just do another version of that erase just over that bit and there you go, it's all gone. Okay, let's jump back to Enhance AI, grab Accent AI, and I swear this is one of the best tools inside of Luminar. Because the Accent AI tool does so much for us, what I like to do is grab hold of the slider and just move it left and right while at the same time keeping my eye on the photo. And as it's changing the photo, I just analyze it and think, okay, where do I like this? What's it doing? And I can see that it's adding saturation, adding contrast, and also bringing up a little bit of detail around the edge of the cat as well. And then once I know exactly what it's doing, what it looked like before, what I'll do is push it pretty high, come in and use a mask, and I can just paint that in just where I want it. So I'll normally settle with a strength somewhere around a third, you know, 33, 34, something like that. Click and then just start painting the effect on only where I want it. So obviously I don't want to enhance everything that was going on around the cats, but what it was doing to the cats, I quite like that. I'm not convinced about the addition of the kind of yellow saturation, but we can deal to that later. But in terms of the actual contrast that it's adding, if I toggle our before and our after, before and after, I quite like that. And once we're happy with our mask, if we think that the actual amount is just a little bit too high, we can just bring that down a little bit. Now, I also think Structure AI is going to be great for this. It normally does a really good job with fur. So there you go. Look at that, bringing out all of that detail. As you can see, it's brought it in through the whole photo. Again, that's not really what we want. And we probably don't want it applied with 100% either. So let's just bring that down somewhere a little bit more reasonable, somewhere around 52. And again, we'll just grab our mask, have the paintbrush, and just say we want the attention to go to the cat's face there. Paint over Moggy on the left here. And just start building it up in layers of areas that we think are important. So I've painted mostly over the kitten's face here, a little bit less on this face, and just a little bit on the body. So if we look at the before and after, you can just see that little bit of visual pop going on. It's always a good idea to keep an eye on where we've come from and where we've got to, Okay, let's move on from here. And let's start to address some of these anomalous colours and distractions around the outside of the cats. And so we'll come to the colour tab here, and we're just going to grab the saturation to start with and just pull out all the colour. And I had an inkling that this photo was going to look really nice as a black and white, and absolutely it does. Let's look at our before and our after. I really like that. But while I may end up with this as a black and white for now, what I want to do is actually just remove the color from those distractions in the background. And so again, I'm going to use a mask to do that. I'm happy with my strength at 34, and I'm just going to click and start painting. So I've painted over this area here. Once I release, we're going to see a dulling down of those colors, and if I want to intensify that, I can just go over areas of more distraction. So that kind of turquoise color up in the corner there, we've got this little purple light here, we can just click on that a few times, and even the blue light we've got going on there. If we toggle that off and toggle it on, you can see that those distractions that were there, we've managed to minimize those. We can do the same for this big red line coming down into the kitten's head here, so we can paint over that. There's one pass. And there's another one. I should probably be taking more care with this mask than what I am, but I am just using a mouse. But I'm showing you guys that it's perfectly possible if all you do have is a mouse that you can do this sort of editing. But if you're serious about getting the most out of your photo editing and masking in general, you want to get yourself something like this. This is a Wacom graphics tablet. I'll put a link in the description below, but these are an absolute godsend for doing this kind of thing, because you can paint directly on the screen. Much better using a pen than a mouse, right? But anyway, totally possible with a mouse. So let's crack on. The strange colours that we've got through the transition of the fireplace over here, if we paint over that, that's just going to take care of that for us as well. We've got some orange and red dots along the top there as well, so we can just take those out if we want to. And down here we can just take this little bit of brown out as well. Currently I'm not painting with 100%, as you know, and so that removal of colour is taking the colour away, but not completely. It's leaving a little bit of it in there at the moment. And so if you're doing a technique like this, it's up to you how much of those colours in the background you want to take away. And we can use this tool to address another issue, which is I find that this cat's face is a lot more yellow and saturated than this wee dude here, and so that's just a little bit distracting. And so I want to try and match the hue that we have going on here with here, and I can do that just by painting over this, perhaps with a lower strength this time, and we'll just build this up. So anywhere where I'm seeing just a little bit too much yellow or brown, I'm just painting over it, and so that's just taking that colour away and desaturating it. There was also a lot of anomalous reddy brown in this little area here that we noticed when we boosted those shadows up, and so I'm just going to paint over that area, and that will help to control those colours as well and give us a more neutral look in there. Okay, let's have a look at our before and our after. Before and after. We've minimized the background and added more interest and contrast to the cat's before and after. Okay, let's suppose purely from a visual point of view, we want to minimize the distraction of these elements in the background. What could we do to help us achieve that? Well, we've already desaturated them, so are there any other things that we could do inside of Luminar Neo to help us focus more on the cat, less on the background? What if we could blur the background even more? Well, I think we can. How about we go into Structure AI, and rather than cranking that to the right and improving structure, how about we take it to the left and soften things off? Want to take it even further? Let's grab the boost slider and boost it up. Okay, let's look at our before and our after. Obviously this is being applied to the whole photo, but what if we just put it into the background? Yep, let's do that. Grab a mask, grab the paintbrush, and this time I'm going to do this a little quicker, so we'll work at about 84% there. That's fine. And you watch this. Once I let go of this, smoothed out, smoothed out, smoothed out. Here we go. Even the little carpet bit down here, those little carpet pits, that might just be a little bit distracting. So let's see what that looks like. Smoothed out. Make the brush a bit smaller and just do this little area just around Kitty's head here. Again, this is where a Wacom tablet comes in so handy. You guys who would have seen my last video on black and white editing would recall that I spoke about how our eye goes to areas of contrast, which is beneficial for the cats here because they've got all their lovely camouflage pattern going on, and that's great contrast right there. But what about areas up here where we've got white, we've got black? That is an area of distraction. So what if we could minimize the differential between the dark grey of the frame here and the white behind? That's what we'll try and do now. And so we want to lift up these blacks and make them closer to the white and therefore reduce that contrast. So there's a couple of ways we could address that. One simple way would be to come into the vignette and rather than doing what we would probably normally do, which is darken the corners down, what if we went the opposite way? If we crank this up, that's going to brighten those edges up. And we could give this a very kind of Hallmark card kind of look by bringing the size in and then feathering it off so it becomes more of an illustration of the cats rather than a photo. But we could kind of go somewhere in between and just ease these off. So that would be one method. So let's look at our before and our after. I've just subtly lightened those up. Let's push it a little bit further. Before and after. I don't want to push this too far because I want to also give you another demonstration of an alternative approach we could take, which is again working with the develop tool, which is just so powerful. And here we could push the exposure slider up. That's going to brighten things up, or jump straight into the shadows and the blacks because it's the darker pixels that we're wanting to brighten up. Let's push the exposure a bit more as well. Now don't panic if you're looking at the cats and thinking I've sent them a bit nuclear. Don't worry, this is again where a mask comes in. So we come and add a mask, grab the paintbrush. Let's bring the strength back down to a more controllable amount, and we're just going to start painting over these darker areas. So the bottom of the TV there, that little bit. Anywhere that we find distracting that we want to lighten up. And because we're working with a strength of only 22, we can build this up in multiple passes. Make our brush nice and big, do a couple of big sweeps around the edge there, and then with a bit more precision, just come in and brighten that bit up as well. Okay, so far by no means is this a perfect edit, but hopefully I've introduced you to some ways of thinking and using the tools for some creative problem solving for issues you might find in your photos as well. From here, we're free to play around with Luminar Neo's more creative tools, and that's exactly what I'm going to do now. So let's dive back in. So let's close this develop tool down and come down to the creative section. And this is where we can have playtime. So I'm just going to choose something. Let's go for dramatic. That normally works quite well for enhancing contrast. And absolutely, look at that. We're really bringing out that black and white contrast in the cats. So here's our before, here's our after. Obviously that's a little bit too strong, but maybe we want a little bit of that. Because of what we've done around the cats, we've got quite a high key look. And so let's see if we can enhance that further with a little bit of glow going on. Now, which glow should we use? Doesn't really matter. Let's just start with soft focus, grab the amount slider and just see how it looks. If we don't like it, it doesn't matter. Just bring that back down, choose something different, grab that slider again and give it a little play. The Autumn effect that was initially designed to work with landscapes, you know, that might be a way forward, but I'm not really enjoying that. What about the Autumn effect soft? Yeah, not too bad. Obviously, how far you push a tool is totally up to you, but I find if you go too far, too heavy-handed, it just smacks a little bit of amateur processing. So although when I'm demonstrating stuff, I'm often pretty heavy-handed with the tools, but that is more so that you guys watching on YouTube can actually see the changes being made and it's not so subtle. But normally, I would recommend if you have an option between being heavy-handed or more subtle, err on the side of subtlety. Now, when we got a sneak peek earlier of this in a black and white, I really liked it. And so my final edit is going to be a kind of form of black and white. So before I commit to that, what I want to do is just export this version. As long as I keep my original file, I have got no issue with exporting images as JPEGs. And depending what you want to do with a file depends on the quality you want to save it at. But normally a quality around 90 is plenty for an export. So I showed you in the last video how the best way to convert to black and white is by using this and then manipulating the colors, but currently we don't really have much in the way of color in this photo anymore, and so we can get away with just going into the color section here and just grabbing the saturation slider and bringing that down, and that's going to create a black and white for us. But we don't have to go for 100% black and white. What we could do is create some kind of hybrid where we've still got a little bit of color, but it's much more subtle and soft. And I think that's the approach I'll take for this one, where we're pushing it towards a black and white, but we're not going into a fully monochromatic image. We're just leaving a little hint of color in there. And then if we want to harmonize the hues through the whole photo, what we can then do is come down to the mood tool, where we're then able to apply a LUT, which is going to give a soft color grade through the whole photo. I really love working with lookup tables, and it's such an easy way to apply a color grade to your photo. Within this tool, we are dealing with what are known as lookup tables. That's what LUT is short for. That comes from the movie industry, and it's a really powerful tool that they use for color grading. That is available to us here in Luminar Neo, but I like the fact they haven't called the tool lookup table, but they've called it mood. I think that's a master stroke, because literally we are applying a mood to the photo. And so when I come down here, I know that San Diego gives us a lovely warm pink through the whole photo, and because this is a loving photo, the cat's cuddling up, I think that's working really nicely. So I can play with the amount slider and just decide how much of that effect I want to have in, and again I want to keep it nice and subtle, so let's go somewhere around that 25. Look at the before, look at the after. So while I do like this desaturated look, it's kind of sterile when you compare it to this lovely warm pink vibe. Okay, you know this is my favorite bit, let's do it. Here's our before and here's our after. Here's our before and our after. I really could have taken this photo in any direction, and I think that's one of the really great things about Luminar Neo. Once you've got that initial technical edit locked in, you can take your edit creatively in just about any direction. Thank you so much, Felix the Cat, for supplying this awesome photo. I hope you approve of my edit. If you guys would like to be featured on the channel, please send your raw photos to anthonyeditsyourphotos@gmail.com. Let me know a little bit about the photo, what you're wanting to achieve, maybe what you're struggling with, and I'll see what I can do. I know a lot of you have sent me photos, and I appreciate that, and you may be thinking, why have you chosen this guy's photo to edit? Well, Felix has been a long time channel supporter, and I really appreciate that. If you guys do find value in the free content that I provide, and you want to just help me out by shouting me a coffee once a month, that'd be amazing. I have a join button that you can click, but if you guys just want to keep watching the videos for free, that's all good as well. Either way, I appreciate you watching the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Click this one up here, go and check that one out. All right, thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Look at you little cuties. Cutie, cutie, cuties.